The clinking of glasses and soft jazz filled the air at the Silver Oak Bistro, a place where rich men came to talk about stocks, cigars, and success. But tonight the story wasn't about them. It was about Alicia Turner, a 27-year-old black waitress with a college degree she never got to use. She moved between tables with calm grace, not just because she had to, but because she refused to let this place define her. And then he walked in. Thomas Whitmore, 48, white, millionaire, owner of 3 car dealerships. The kind of man who smiled too easily and looked down on people without even realizing it. "Evening, sir," Alicia said, notebook in hand, polite as always. Thomas leaned back, scanning the menu. "You know, Alicia," he said casually, "maybe you could give me some financial advice. You probably know all about saving tips, huh?" The laughter at his table was loud, sharp. It wasn't just a joke, it was a reminder of how invisible she was to them. For a second, Alicia froze. Her pen stopped moving. The world seemed to slow down. Then she looked straight at him, eyes calm, voice steady. "Well, sir," she said softly, "I do know something about saving, like how to save people from embarrassing themselves in public." The laughter stopped. "You could hear a pin drop. If you're watching this, tell me where you're from in the comments. Hit like and subscribe, because this story is about what happens when someone finally stands up in a world that keeps trying to put them down. But Alicia's story didn't start here. No, this was just the moment everyone noticed her. The real story began long before that, in a tiny apartment on the south side of Atlanta, with unpaid bills, rejection letters, and a dream she refused to let die. Every morning before work, she'd look in the mirror and whisper, "You're more than they see." But some days, even she didn't believe it. And that night when Thomas laughed, something in her snapped, not in anger, but in power. Because what he didn't know was that Alicia had once studied finance. She knew the numbers. She knew the game, and soon he'd know it too. 3 years before that night at the Silver Oak Bistro, Alicia Turner sat in a dimly lit library corner, staring at a rejection email on her cracked phone screen. "We appreciate your interest, but we've decided to move forward with another candidate." It was the same message she'd read 12 times that month. Different companies, same outcome. Alicia had a degree in finance, top 10% of her class. She'd worked double shifts through college, balancing textbooks and bills. She believed that if you worked hard enough, the world would notice. But the world didn't. When she walked into interviews, the smiles froze the second they saw her. A few managers even said it outright. "You're not really the face we're looking for. The position requires someone who fits our clientele's image." She knew what that meant. It wasn't about her resume. It was about her skin. Her mother, Denise, used to tell her, "Baby, you'll have to work twice as hard just to get half as far. But you keep your head high. No one can take your worth if you don't hand it to them." So she did. Alicia refused to give up. She took the waitress job just for a while. That while turned into 2 years. At first, she told herself it was temporary, a stepping stone. But over time, the job started to feel like quicksand. The harder she tried to climb out, the deeper she sank. Customers called her sweetheart and honey, like she wasn't a real person. Some avoided her hand when she passed them their drink. Others complained about her attitude if she didn't smile wide enough. But Alicia kept her composure, always, because she'd learned that in places like the Silver Oak, silence was safer than confrontation, until Thomas Whitmore came along. That night, something shifted. It wasn't just a cruel joke. It was years of disrespect condensed into one smug smile. And even though she'd managed to shut him down with that single cutting line, Alicia knew this wasn't over. Because in that frozen moment, Thomas's pride had been bruised, and men like him didn't take humiliation quietly. "You'll regret that," his eyes had said. Even if his mouth hadn't. The next morning, Alicia woke up with a strange mix of fear and fire. She didn't know it yet, but that one moment, one sentence, would change her life completely. The next evening, Alicia walked into work with a heavy heart. She replayed that moment over and over. The laughter, her comeback, the silence that followed. Part of her was proud. The other part, terrified. She knew how this place worked. In restaurants like the Silver Oak, rich customers didn't complain, they reported. And black waitresses didn't get second chances. Her manager, Jeff, was waiting by the counter when she clocked in. "Alicia," he said, arms crossed. "Thomas Whitmore called this morning." Her stomach dropped. Jeff sighed. "He said you were disrespectful, tried to humiliate him in front of his clients." "That's not what happened," Alicia said quickly. "He made a joke about—" "I don't want the details," Jeff interrupted. "You know how important he is to this place. I can't afford to lose a regular like that." Alicia clenched her jaw. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying watch your tone next time. Smile more. Don't take things so personally. Smile more." The same words she'd heard 100 times before. She walked to the back, took a deep breath and tied her apron. She refused to cry, not here, not for them. Later that night, while she served table 7, she noticed Thomas again. Same table, same smug grin. But this time he wasn't alone. He'd brought someone, a tall man in a tailored navy suit, sharp, serious, watching everything. Thomas caught her glance and smirked. "You remember Alicia, right? The waitress/financial guru," the other man chuckled politely. "You weren't kidding." Alicia kept her voice calm. "Would you gentlemen like the usual drinks?" Thomas leaned in, eyes glinting. "Actually, I'd like to hear more of your financial wisdom. Maybe tell us how you manage on—" "What, tips?" Laughter again. But this time it wasn't just mean, it was planned. He wanted to make her a joke. Alicia's hands trembled slightly, but she didn't break. She looked him in the eye and said, "Funny thing, Mr. Whitmore. Money doesn't always measure value. Some people are broke in ways a bank can't fix." The other man looked away, uncomfortable. Thomas's smirk faltered. Alicia walked off, pretending her heart wasn't racing. But she knew she'd just painted a target on her back, because powerful men don't like being reminded of their weakness, especially by someone they think is beneath them. And by the end of that week, she'd find out just how far he was willing to go to make her pay. 3 days passed. No calls from HR, no word from Jeff, just silence, the kind that made your stomach twist because you knew something was coming. Alicia kept her head down, worked her shifts, smiled when she had to. But every time the door opened, her heart jumped. Every time her manager called her name, she braced herself. Then on Friday night, it happened. Jeff pulled her aside right after the dinner rush. His face was blank, the kind of blank that hid bad news. "Corporate's coming in next week," he said. "We're doing a review. Customer service, professionalism, all that." Alicia frowned. "Since when does corporate review servers?" He avoided her eyes. "Since one of our VIPs filed a formal complaint." Her chest tightened. "Thomas, he said you were rude, condescending, unprofessional." Jeff continued. "They'll observe you on shift. Just be on your best behavior, okay?" Alicia wanted to scream. But she didn't, because she knew exactly how this worked. One incident report, and she was gone. That night she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything. Her mother's voice echoed in her head. "Baby, don't let them turn your silence into surrender." So the next morning, Alicia decided something quietly radical. She wouldn't let Thomas write her story. If they wanted to watch her, fine. She'd give them something to see. When the corporate team arrived, the tension was thick. 2 men in suits, 1 woman with a clipboard. They stood at the bar, taking notes while pretending to sip coffee. Alicia worked with precision. Every table, every smile, flawless. Customers complimented her. Even the grumpy regulars softened. For a moment, she felt in control again. Then, around 8 p.m., Thomas Whitmore walked in. Of course he did. He saw the corporate reps and smiled like a man about to perform. "Evening, Alicia," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. "Still offering financial consultations with dinner?" The room went quiet. Her pulse thudded in her ears. She smiled calmly. "Only if you're ready to learn about humility, Mr. Whitmore." One of the corporate reps raised an eyebrow. The others exchanged looks. Thomas's smirk wavered just a bit, but he recovered quickly. "Still got that attitude, huh?" he said. "Careful, sweetheart. That mouth might cost you your job." Her hand tightened around the tray. She could have walked away. She should have, but Alicia had been quiet for too long. And for the first time, she wasn't afraid of what would happen if she spoke. She was afraid of what would happen if she didn't. The restaurant felt colder that night. Not because of the air conditioning, but because every eye seemed to follow her. Alicia could feel the tension buzzing, like static in her veins. Thomas sat at his corner table, swirling his drink. The corporate team was still watching, pens ready. It was the perfect trap, and he knew it. When Alicia brought over his steak, Thomas leaned back with a smirk. "You ever think about investing, Alicia?" he asked loudly. "Oh, wait, you probably can't afford that." A couple of businessmen nearby chuckled. Even Jeff, her manager, pretended not to notice. Alicia inhaled slowly. She placed the plate down gently. "I actually can afford to invest, Mr. Whitmore," she said evenly. "Just not in the kind of ego that loses value this fast." The laughter stopped. Even the music seemed to fade. Thomas's smile hardened. "Excuse me?" Alicia met his eyes. "You heard me." He slammed his hand on the table. "Unbelievable. You think you can talk to me like that and keep your job?" Every instinct told her to back down, apologize, walk away, survive. But something in her refused. She'd swallowed too many insults, too many jokes, too many moments where she'd been told to smile more. "Not tonight. Respect goes both ways," she said quietly, "and it's not something money can buy." The entire restaurant went silent. Even Jeff looked pale. Thomas's face turned red. He threw his napkin on the table and stood up. "You'll regret this," he hissed. "People like you always do." Then he stormed out. The moment he was gone, the corporate team exchanged glances and began whispering. Jeff rushed over, panic in his eyes. "Alicia, what were you thinking? That man practically owns this place." She didn't answer. She just untied her apron and said quietly, "Then maybe I don't belong in a place he owns." And with that, she walked into the break room, shaking, heart pounding, but standing taller than she ever had. She sat on the bench, staring at her trembling hands. For the first time, she wasn't sure if she'd just ruined her life or taken it back. The next morning, she got the email. "You are suspended pending investigation. No explanation. No hearing, just silence." Again. But Alicia didn't know that this time someone had been watching. Someone who saw the truth that night. And in a few days, that person would change everything. Alicia didn't leave her apartment for 2 days. She just sat there, phone in hand, staring at the suspension email. No paycheck meant no rent. No rent meant no home. The same fear she'd fought for years was back, the one that whispered, "You'll never get ahead, no matter how hard you try." Then, on the 3rd day, she got a text from an unknown number. "Hey Alicia, this is Evan. I was at the restaurant Friday night. Can we talk?" She frowned. "Evan?" A quick search on social media made her heart race. Evan Cole, financial advisor, public speaker, owner of Cole Capital Partners. He was the man who'd been sitting at Thomas's table that night. Alicia hesitated, then typed back, "What about? What happened at Silver Oak? I think you should know something." They met later that afternoon at a quiet coffee shop downtown. Evan was younger than she expected, mid-30s, sharp suit but kind eyes. He stood up as she walked in. "Thanks for meeting me," he said. She crossed her arms. "If this is about defending your friend, save it." He shook his head. "He's not my friend. He's my client. And after what I saw, he won't be for long." Alicia blinked. "You saw what happened?" Evan nodded. "I did. And not just me. The corporate team saw too. They're the ones who called me afterward." Her stomach flipped. "Why would they call you?" "Because one of them used to work under me," Evan said. "She told me the truth. You handled yourself with class." "Thomas crossed the line?" Alicia exhaled shakily. "So why am I the one suspended?" "Because people like him have influence," Evan replied. "And people like you? They hope you'll stay quiet." He leaned forward. "But you shouldn't. You've got something most people don't." "Proof." "Proof?" she asked, confused. Evan nodded. "Security footage. Silver Oak records every shift. My contact says the cameras caught everything. The jokes, your response, his outburst. If that video surfaces, Thomas's reputation goes up in flames." Alicia stared at him. "You're saying they'd cover it up?" "I'm saying they already are," Evan said. "Unless someone makes noise." Her heart pounded. For the first time, she saw a way out, but it came with risk. Evan leaned back, voice calm but firm. "You don't owe anyone silence, Alicia. You were humiliated in front of a crowd for existing. You stood your ground, and that deserves to be seen." Alicia looked down at her trembling hands, then back at him. "What do I have to do?" she whispered. Evan smiled slightly. "Tell your story. I'll handle the rest." By Monday morning, Alicia's story was everywhere. Even though she hadn't planned it that way, Evan had convinced her to record a short video just 3 minutes long. No fancy editing, no music, just her voice, raw and steady. She sat on the edge of her couch, looking straight into the camera. "My name is Alicia Turner," she began. "I'm 27, and I work as a waitress at the Silver Oak Bistro in Atlanta. Last Friday night, a wealthy customer made a racist joke at my expense, and when I defended myself, I got suspended. No anger. No yelling, just truth." Evan posted it on his professional LinkedIn first. Within hours, it was everywhere. Shared, reposted, clipped, and dissected. By the end of the day, the hashtag #JustStandWithAlicia was trending. Strangers flooded her DMs with support. Old co-workers texted her saying, "I saw what he did. You're brave for speaking out." Even news outlets started calling, but not everyone was supportive. Trolls filled the comments too. Another victim story. She probably made it up for attention. She should have just smiled and done her job. Alicia tried not to read them, but she did. And every cruel word felt like a cut. Then came the phone call. "Jeff, Alicia," he said, his voice tight. "Corporate's furious. They're saying you broke confidentiality by talking to the media." "I told my story," she replied. "That's not confidential." "Well, they're reviewing your employment." "It doesn't look good," she hung up, her hands shaking. For a moment, fear gripped her again, that she'd gone too far, that she'd lose everything. But then her phone buzzed again. This time it was Evan. "Check your email. You're going to want to see this." She opened it. A file titled "Security Footage, Silver Oak." It showed everything. Thomas leaning back, making the joke. The laughter. Alicia's calm response. His rage. His threat, no editing, no lies. Just truth. Captured in 4K. Evan's message below it was simple. "This is your armor now. Use it." Alicia stared at the screen, her heart pounding. For years, she'd felt invisible, unseen and unheard. Now the whole world was watching, and Thomas Whitmore. He was about to feel the weight of every word he'd ever thrown at someone like her. By Tuesday morning, the video had reached nearly 2 million views. Not just Alicia's story, the footage. Evan had quietly sent the clip to a trusted journalist at the Atlanta Herald, who verified it before publishing. Headline: "Waitress suspended after defending herself from racist joke. Security footage tells the truth." Within hours, the internet caught fire. TV hosts debated it. Podcasters broke it down frame by frame. Even a few celebrity accounts reposted it with the caption, "This is what courage looks like." Meanwhile, Thomas Whitmore's empire started to crack. His dealership's social media pages were flooded with comments. Sponsors pulled back. And the board of investors, the same men who once laughed at his jokes, started questioning whether he had become the liability. By noon, he released a statement. "I deeply regret any misunderstanding that occurred and have the utmost respect for all individuals." It was hollow, corporate, insincere, and everyone knew it. Alicia sat in her small apartment, watching the chaos unfold on her phone. For the first time in years, she wasn't the one being silenced, but she wasn't celebrating either. Because behind the headlines and hashtags was a truth only she felt. This wasn't just her victory. It was her exhaustion, finally seen. When she walked outside to get some air, she found a small crowd gathered on the corner. 2 women smiled at her. One held up her phone showing Alicia's video. "You're her, right? The waitress." Alicia hesitated. "Yeah, that's me." The woman grinned. "You gave us all a voice. Don't stop now." For a moment, Alicia couldn't speak. She just nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. That afternoon, Evan called. "They offered you reinstatement," he said. Alicia blinked. "They what?" "Full apology, back pay, and an internal investigation. They're terrified of a lawsuit." Alicia laughed softly, not from joy, but disbelief. They didn't care about justice," she said. "They cared about damage control." Evan nodded. "Maybe, but you made them care about something. That's more than most ever manage." Later that night, Thomas finally called her himself. The number popped up as unknown. Against her better judgment, she answered. "Alicia." His voice was low, almost unrecognizable. "You don't understand what this is doing to me. I'm losing everything." She took a long breath. "You made a joke at my expense. I lost my job, my dignity. You thought it was funny. Was it? He didn't answer. She continued, steady and clear. You don't get to choose when the consequences start, Mr. Whitmore. Only when they stop. She hung up. Her hands trembled, but not from fear. From power. For the first time she realized she didn't just survive the moment, she changed it. 2 weeks passed. The headlines had started to cool down, but Alicia's name hadn't faded. She'd been invited to speak on podcasts, morning shows, even at a local university event about racial equity in the workplace. For someone who'd once been invisible behind an apron, she was suddenly seen everywhere, but fame wasn't what she wanted. She wanted meaning. One morning her phone buzzed again, this time with a message from Evan. Can we meet? I've got something important to discuss. They met at the same coffee shop as before. Evan looked excited, papers spread out in front of him. I've been thinking, he said. You've got a voice people trust now. You could do something with that, something real. Alicia raised an eyebrow. Like what? He smiled. A financial literacy project for young women of color. Workshops, online content, mentoring. You've lived this. You are the story that proves knowledge is power. Alicia blinked, stunned. You serious? Completely. I'll handle the business side. You handle the message. We'll call it Turner Initiatives. For a moment she couldn't speak. All her life she'd been told what she couldn't do. Too inexperienced, too emotional, too outspoken. Now someone was asking her to lead. She looked out the cafe window, where sunlight spilled across the street, and said softly, let's do it. Over the next month, Alicia worked harder than ever. She spoke to high schools, recorded short videos about budgeting, credit, and financial freedom, all through the lens of resilience. Her message was simple. You might not be born into wealth, but you can build it. Knowledge is the first dollar you'll ever earn. The response was overwhelming. Emails poured in from women across the country. I watched your video with my daughter. Thank you for giving us hope. You made me believe I can do this too. Alicia couldn't stop smiling. It felt like redemption, not revenge. But one night, as she scrolled through her messages, a new name appeared in her inbox. Thomas Whitmore. Her heart skipped. The subject line read, Request for a meeting. She hesitated before clicking it open. Alicia, I've been following what you're doing. I owe you an apology, not just words, but actions. I want to contribute to your foundation, if you'll allow it. No cameras. No PR, just an honest gesture. She sat frozen, reading it again and again. The same man who mocked her was now offering to support her work. Was it guilt? Redemption? She didn't know. But she did know one thing. This was bigger than the both of them now. Alicia typed slowly, her fingers steady. Meet me at the Silver Oak Bistro tomorrow at noon. The same table, the same place it all began. But this time, she'd be the one walking in with power. The Silver Oak Bistro looked the same. Polished marble floors, soft jazz, waiters gliding like ghosts. But for Alicia, everything felt different. The last time she walked through those doors, she was just a waitress. Today, she walked in as the founder of Turner Initiatives, with a small team waiting outside and a reputation that spoke louder than any uniform ever could. Thomas Whitmore was already seated at their old table, the same one where he'd once laughed at her. But this time he didn't laugh. He stood up, extending his hand. Alicia, he said quietly, thank you for meeting me. She nodded. You wanted to talk. Let's talk. He looked smaller somehow. Not physically, but in presence. The arrogance was gone. I've done a lot of thinking since that night, he said. You were right. Money made me arrogant. I thought respect was something I could buy. But when I saw what you built, what you turned that moment into, I realized you're everything I pretended to be. Alicia said nothing, just watched him. Thomas continued, voice unsteady. I hurt you. I disrespected you. I tried to destroy your livelihood because I was embarrassed. And for that, I'm deeply sorry. She folded her hands on the table. Do you know what hurt the most, Mr. Whitmore? She asked softly. He shook his head. It wasn't your joke. It was how normal it felt. Like it was just another day being looked down on. That's what I want to change, Thomas nodded slowly. That's why I wanted to help. I'd like to make a contribution, not to buy forgiveness, but to do something right for once. He slid a small envelope across the table. Inside was a check, a large one, enough to fund Turner initiatives for a full year. Alicia stared at it for a moment, then pushed it back toward him. "I don't need your money," she said calmly, "but I'll take your partnership if you're willing to show up, speak, volunteer, learn." Thomas looked surprised. "You'd want me involved?" She nodded. "If this is about real change, then the people who cause the harm have to be part of the healing. That's the only way it means anything." He sat back, speechless. Then for the first time he smiled, not the smug grin from before, but something sincere. "I'll be there," he said. "Every time you'll have me." Alicia stood. "Then we'll start next week." As she walked out, sunlight poured through the restaurant's glass doors, washing over her like a quiet victory. She'd faced the man who once mocked her, and she'd done it on her terms. Outside, Evan was waiting. "How'd it go?" She smiled. "It went exactly how it needed to." That night, Alicia wrote in her journal, "Forgiveness isn't weakness. It's freedom, not for them but for you." And as she set her pen down, she realized she hadn't just rewritten her story. She'd rewritten the ending for every woman who'd ever been laughed at, talked down to, or silenced. A week later, the Silver Oak Bistro hosted something it had never seen before, a community financial workshop, led by Alicia Turner herself. The same restaurant that once silenced her now echoed with her voice. Dozens of young women filled the seats, notebooks in hand, eyes bright with hope. And in the back corner, quietly taking notes of his own, sat Thomas Whitmore. No cameras, no press, no grand apology speech. Just a man finally listening. Alicia stood at the front, confident but calm. "When I worked here," she began, "I used to think power came from money, from who could speak the loudest or wear the finest suit. But I've learned that power is something else entirely." She paused, letting her words settle. "Real power is in knowing your worth, even when someone tries to convince you otherwise." A few women nodded, others teared up silently. Alicia smiled. "When that man made a joke at my expense, I could have stayed quiet. I could have laughed along just to keep my job. But silence doesn't keep you safe. It just keeps you small." In the back, Thomas lowered his eyes. After the session, he approached her quietly. "I still don't deserve your forgiveness," he said. Alicia looked at him and replied, "Maybe not. But forgiveness isn't something you earn. It's something people give to free themselves, and I'm finally free." He nodded, visibly moved. Later that evening, Alicia and Evan sat outside the restaurant, watching the sunset spill over the city skyline. Evan smiled. "You know, you could have turned this into revenge. But you didn't." Alicia shook her head. "Revenge doesn't rebuild anything. Justice does. Education does. That's the difference." Evan leaned back. "So what's next for Turner initiatives?" She grinned. "We're expanding. I've got calls from 2 other cities. They want to host our workshops. People are ready for change. They just need someone to start the conversation." That night, Alicia went home, took off her shoes, and stood in front of her mirror, the same one she'd looked into every morning before work. But this time, she didn't whisper, "You're more than they see," because now the world did see her. Her reflection wasn't just a waitress anymore. It was a leader, a teacher, a survivor who turned pain into purpose. As she closed her eyes, she thought of her mother's words, "Don't let them turn your silence into surrender." And she smiled, whispering back, "I didn't, Mama. I never did." Months passed. Alicia Turner's name had become more than a trending hashtag. It had become a symbol. She wasn't just the waitress who stood up to a millionaire anymore. She was the woman who rewrote the story of what happens when you refuse to stay silent in the face of racism. No matter how powerful your opponent looks, her workshops grew into a nonprofit, and the Turner initiatives are dedicated to teaching financial literacy and workplace empowerment for women of color across the U.S. The same woman who once counted tips to pay rent was now helping hundreds of others learn how to own their power. But the biggest change wasn't in her career, it was in her heart, because for the first time, Alicia realized that healing doesn't come when the world apologizes. It comes when you decide that their ignorance won't define you anymore. One morning, as she walked past the Silver Oak Bistro, she paused at the front door. Inside, new staff were laughing, cleaning tables, getting ready for the lunch rush. She smiled, not with bitterness, but with peace. A new manager spotted her through the window and came outside. "You're Alicia Turner, right?" She nodded. He smiled nervously. "The owner left a note for you." She opened it. It read, "Thank you for teaching us what grace looks like. We're better now because you didn't stay quiet." Her eyes welled up. Not because of the words, but because they finally meant something. That night, Alicia stood on a stage in front of a crowd of young women, microphones and cameras all around. She took a deep breath and said, "Racism isn't always a scream. Sometimes it's a joke, a look, a question that cuts too deep. But every time we speak up, every time we choose truth over fear, we change the world a little bit more." The crowd erupted in applause. She smiled, tears glimmering in her eyes. "This isn't just my story. It's every woman's story who's ever been told she's less than she is. And it's proof that no matter where you start, your voice can move mountains." Then she looked into the camera just like in her first video and said, "What would you have done in my place? Would you have stayed quiet or spoken up? Tell me in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more true stories about courage, injustice, and hope." The screen faded to black and her voice echoed one last time, calm, strong, unbroken. Never underestimate the woman they tried to silence.